Good evening and welcome to another Ferro stream with myself and my two co-hosts, Alexander Adams and Panama Hat. How are you doing this evening, gentlemen?
Diversity is our strength, comrades.
We have nothing to lose but our chains, and I love the nation of Israel.
Wonderful. Have you, gentlemen, been doing it? What's been going on this last couple of weeks?
I'll defer to Hat in this instance.
I have been very busy working on various projects and organizing something quite major, which is happening tomorrow. Well, it's sort of happening the day after, but I have to travel to London tomorrow in order to make arrangements, various things. So I've been doing that, and also just generally sorting out many different things, including just like completely reorganizing where I live and many other things.
He's like the milk tray man. He's this mysterious character entering London for a single day.
Yeah, he's the next James Bond, I believe.
I would actually.
I can neither confirm or deny that rumor.
I think we need to work in your stunts. How good at a shot are you?
I'm a pretty good shot. I learned to shoot as a kid.
And you've got horse riding down already.
This is it. I imagine Hat as James Bond is like, because obviously what's quite good about some of the earlier James Bonds is they all had their kind of different character and flavors, and Hat's one would be this kind of aristocratic, more kind of like the Commander Bond, I imagine. But with a kind of cool suaveness.
Well, the trouble is, I have too much like contempt for women in order to like go around and then of course the other issue is that like I'm probably a bit too Catholic of a character for James Bond.
Just lots of confessional booths. That's how you could,
after every scene where something illicit happens.
I'm gonna need an AK-47 and a priest.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Alex, what about yourself?
I've been slowly but surely trawling my library for books on aesthetics because, as announced in the last stream, I'm doing Foundations of Aesthetics, and so that's been it is a big project, a very big project. So.
Yes. I didn't really need to talk about that last time we were chatting, but aesthetic philosophy for me, I think, is a fundamental that was taught to all parts of society until around about 80 years ago, where it really dropped out of favor. So I think if you can come up with a new version of it that's accessible to the new elite, then I think that'll be a really worthwhile venture. Who are the kind of people you're going to see inside there? Can you give us a little tasters?
Oh, well, you're going to start off with Plato, and then you've got Aristotle.
Yes.
Going through the liberal arts, then jumping forward into going through the schoolmen because I believe it's we've got some schoolmen who wrote on aesthetics. Then we've got you got Kant. Of course, is the big one, but then we've also got a bit of Schopenhauer. We've got Nietzsche on tragedy.
Yeah, that Nietzsche is good. Good, yeah.
And going to do some Benedetto Croce.
Very good. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, hoping to get going to be stopping somewhere in the 20th century. Not quite sure where, but I'm going to get all the big beasts in.
Literally, what's Kant's book again? It's like the thing on judgment or something, isn't it? Discourse on
critique of pure reason.
Oh yeah.
Truly impenetrable.
It's literally unreadable, and it ruins aesthetics. He's just such a nerd. I'm just tired of these nerd philosophers. If you read through Plato and Aristotle, you can tell they're just they're chads, and they just do other stuff apart from just read stuff all the time. But I just can't be doing with Kant. Ruins aesthetics, ruins everything. But I guess I suppose you have to cover him.
I think people will be asking for their money back if Kant is not covered in at least one module. Yes.
I don't want to distract too far from the stream itself, but just because I was discussing it the other day, what do you make of the aesthetics of Roger Scruton, arguably one of the most prolific aestheticists in recent times?
I tend to. I've read a couple of things by him on aesthetics, and he will definitely be in one of the later modules. He's more of a traditionalist, but he was very interested in musical theory. He also wrote on Kant, so I'll be looking at his responses to Kant and also his discussion of the place of beauty in aesthetics, because that's going to be like a central part.
Beauty was his big book, and I've read through that. I mean, he comes from the liberal school, which is basically Kant onwards.
Well, this is the trouble.
Yeah, and exactly. But in terms of like, what does he evolve? Some of that kind of the liberal ideas. I'm not so sure. I don't think that Scruton is like a big like new thinker, but what he tries to do is to recapture and sort of shore up the liberal position on aesthetics, basically, and say this is what it is, because again, when he's writing, is it like the 90s that beauty came out?
Yes.
Aesthetics had basically been removed from all philosophy degrees, or like most of them, and also from like just all kinds of discourse. We're in full postmodern subjective land by this time. So I think what his aim was to do was to kind of to sort of lay out the tent for an aesthetic philosophy, and then where beauty is quite good is that he points out loads of different considerations about society and how they can impact beauty. Like, for example, one that always stayed with me was he talked about Georgian proportions and building regulations, and he was saying that due to current building regs, it's not possible to create a correctly proportioned Georgian house, because the door sizes have to be a certain height. This is for public buildings.
Yeah.
You have to have like a wheel ramp going up to it. You can't have this kind of dramatic, beautiful. On the Foundations podcast, we call it staircase pilled houses.
Staircase pilled houses, yeah.
Like gorgeous houses. You have to have like a wheelchair ramp as part of it, which is a natural eyesore. So it's interesting how the society and structure influences aesthetics. So.
I can quote you indeed. I have it right here. So indeed, the current building code, which requires the entrance doors to be wide enough and doorsteps low enough to take a large invalid's wheelchair, makes it all but impossible to design a front door that looks right in the way that ordinary Georgian pattern book doors look right. So there you are. It's a quotation from page 69, which I have in front of me.
That is amazing. I swear that we did not have a chat about that beforehand.
That they genuinely did. That wasn't planned.
I have I have all of my aesthetics books in a big pile right next to my computer, so I can't neglect them. Yeah, so
that's great. That's great.
He's become a quote master of aesthetic philosophy now. You can pull any quote out in seconds.
Well, it's because what I love about aesthetics is it's very accessible. I would say maybe all of the kind of philosophical schools, because it's so tied to reality. It's really not that abstract unless you look at Kant. Basically, I think so. It's always tied into reality. So it's easier for some low IQ fool like me to approach and understand. So.
Well, it's you know that meme where it's like the curve of the IQ, how like there's a few people that are really stupid and a few people that are really smart, and then most people are just like the midwits in the middle. It's like you've got like some like Yorkshireman stood in front of like a palace going, "Oh, that's a really nice building," and then you've got like some base philosopher like Roger Scruton talking about why it's such a beautiful building, and then you've got the midwits in the middle going, "Oh, I love the Centre Pompidou," or like "No, I want it to be a flat cube," or whatever. That's how I see it. I think that aesthetics is a great place to like fight that kind of subversion, because it's like it's the most open part, and as you say, it's not really subjective. Like everybody really knows what a beautiful building looks like compared to an ugly one. It's quite clear.
I think the acid test is something like when you've got musical notes. Musical notes are actually determined by their frequency is determined by mathematical interludes. So there is actually a correct, sort of C major and so whatever.
The music of the spheres. You need to make sure you get your Boethius inside there, Alex.
Yes,
I'll be not happy.
Okay.
Take the Boethius, Bill.
Okay,
constellations of philosophy. Okay.
Yeah, let's get cracking. So today, the kind of idea and vision behind the stream was looking into the home of the artist. Now, for any of you who have travelled abroad or have spent some time in places like National Trust properties, you will have bumped into a number of places which used to be artists' homes or studios. And throughout my life, I've encountered a number of very beautiful, interesting spaces that often surprised me. They often confused me, and made me question the artist more than I'd necessarily thought. You know, when we think about an artist, we assume that the work that they're in just gets pulled into the house they live in. Now, I guess if you look today at a lot of the kind of modern architects that Mr. Hatt just referenced, there is an irony where like 90% of those modern architects will live in like a nice Georgian villa in Chelsea and not one of their own modernist blocks. And there is a sort of element of truth to that through most of these artists. But I thought it would be an interesting topic to look into. Now, I noticed in chat that Liberty Elle Sueur mentioned around Thomas Carlyle's house, and again, that's I mean, it's not necessarily an artist's house, but the house of a great man and a thinker. And I've been there. I'm sure both you gentlemen have as well. And it's not. Again, we build up these ideas of people in our heads, these kind of heroic figures, and then you sort of see their house, and I'm always sort of taken back a little bit and say, it's just such a humble dwelling. Carlyle's house is very stripped back, very simple. Probably like not a huge amount of floor space, for example, but yet he still managed to churn out so many amazing works. But when you sort of get beyond that kind of shock factor, you start to pick up little details and interesting little tidbits about their lives and who they are. So I'll throw it over to you guys. What do you think? Do you think the artist home says anything about the artist? Does it match up? Is it related? Is it important?
I would say that yes, it can be, but also you have to remember that some artists were living in places that they knew would become a museum. So we've already seen, if you go back to the Salvador Dali stream, I think it's stream number 2 or 3. We start, it's probably 3, where we talk about Dali's Teatro Museo in Figueras, which he designed himself, and then of course his other houses became museums after his death. So there is a crossover where some artists are actually making places as well as art. And I think we also spoke about Moreau in one of our symbolism streams, and he, of course, he was living in what he knew would become a museum, and he was actually painting pictures for the walls of his own museum. We also had that with Antoine Wiertz, who I think also came up in one of the symbolist stream, the Belgian artist who had his house museum built by the state because the state was in need of some art, it being a new state, the Belgian state being created in 1830 or 1831. The Belgian state needed sort of a national artist, as it were, and Wiertz was kind of nominated as one of their prime candidates, and so he was sort of given a museum while he was still working in order to fill it up. And he wanted sort of like a ruined temple outside, but they only gave him, I think, but I think they only gave him like a pillar or something. So they said you can have the house, but you can't have like the ruined temple.
It's interesting. There's a crossover between reality and then the mythos, and then again, someone like Dali who's trying to build up his legacy and to try and project into the future. While again, some of these spaces are just beautiful lived-in spaces that just happened to kind of be picked up later. I think that's a really interesting point around the state and the artist. And again, a lot of the preserved spaces are nationally owned. And again, it's kind of like the state's recognised we need an artistic figure, or we need a tourist attraction, and then they try and recreate or reclaim the space. So you do have to be careful around there. Mr. Hatz, what's your thoughts on the homes of the artist?
I agree with Alexander Adams that it can and can't be important. And I think that, as you say, there's this issue with kind of self-awareness that I don't really like it when artists are sort of self-aware about, they know their house is going to become a museum, so they kind of like cultivate it like that. I think that, yeah, it does reveal a lot about an artist's kind of way. Because the thing is that something that we kind of lost in the West very long ago, even that they maintained, I would say, in a country like Japan, is this idea that everything you do, even the most mundane things, have an aesthetic. That they have an aesthetic of kind of doing things. That is then reflected in the domestic space. So for example, the Japanese will have their like paper walled room with like the soft floor that they'll have just as like a thinking space or a study space, or the way things are arranged, or how, I suppose, going back in the West, we developed things like the cooking range, or things that have an aesthetic of work about them, I suppose. And that is an idea that has completely vanished in the West now. I think the industrial era kind of killed that, because again, instead of being able to sort of just do each aspect of your life, even the mundane things, you're now forced to do it to a timetable. You're now forced to live your life around, say, going to work somewhere, as opposed to a profession or a kind of homestead. So you've got that problem, I think.
Well,
but yes,
even a craftsman would have kind of strange hours, wouldn't he, or like periods of large amounts of work, and not similar to the artist.
Definitely.
Alex, I guess we've got to ask the question: have you been preparing your home to be one day to be a museum, and sculpting the interior?
Well, I'm not quite sure how my landlords would feel about me adapting their quite small but very pleasant flat in Bristol. No, but I have my sights set on slightly more permanent things. So yeah, I suppose I would leave that to my family to decide after I was gone. I'm not sure I'm capable of making that decision ahead of posterity.
Decide where the plaque is on the wall outside. Artist, writer of books,
and live stream guest.
And live stream guest to the best
commentator.
Okay, yeah. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to dive in. I'm going to go straight up with one of the best ones already, because we need to get some red meat right from the start here. A la Bojo. Now we're going to start off with.
That's not going to be a dated reference at all.
No way.
People definitely know this in a year's time. Okay, this is Leighton House. Now, the house of Lord Leighton. Now, for ages, I thought that Lord Leighton was actually a lord, but it's just his name, isn't it?
No, I think he was ennobled.
He was ennobled.
I think it was in his last year of his life. He was a knight for a long time, and then he became a lord or a baron or something right at the very end, I think. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, that's very confusing. Just some background to Leighton. I'm sure Alexander can come in as well. So Leighton's I would say kind of mid to late 19th century academic / pre-Raphaelite artist. Now, just in terms of context, you've got to think 1850s is the PRB, the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. That's the kind of first iteration. Morris is kind of around like 1855, I would say. But then there's a bit of a gap. There is kind of like the first generation of the PRB, and then there's the kind of like more mainstream kind of academic version that comes through. And I would say that Leighton is very much at the head of that wave. He's kind of like a figure that's loved across the country. I know that Queen Victoria purchased several of his paintings. He became the president of the Royal Academy. He was this kind of very famous, well-loved figure. I think he's buried in Westminster as well, isn't he?
Yes, I believe so. He was one of the founding movers between for the establishment of what became the Tate Gallery, which I think opened the year after he died. I think he died in 1896 or something like that.
Yeah, and there's a number of his works you'll be very, very familiar with. But again, I would describe his style as it's part of this kind of like post Jerome academic. There's kind of like classical influences, and but then there's also that kind of strain of English Romanticism and kind of post initial pre-Raphaelite style to his work as well.
Yeah, he's often described as the leader of the aesthetic movement, which is sort of like the 1880s and 1890s. Yeah,
yeah. So he's kind of gains his fame in like the 80s. And again, you've got to realise that the actual arts and crafts society that we take the name from was founded in the 80s as well by Walter Crane and a couple of other guys. So this is kind of like arts and crafts as mainstream, even though Morris has been around for a little while. And this is his house, which I think he builds even later towards that. I think it's in the 90s.
Yes, it was
it's
built
quite
just
a strange
a few years
design. Just externally, this is it's kind of, I don't know if it's technically in Chelsea. It's if you go off like kind of north of High Street, Ken. I think it's round about that area in my head. But very much kind of like what would have been suburban.
Oh. Farrow's dropped out. It's West London. I thought it's between sort of Holland Park and Kensington, I think. Yeah. And Farrow has dropped out, so we're gonna have to busk it.
Pieces. Yeah. Right. Start talking about this house.
Yes. So obviously, Leighton spent a lot of time in Germany and northern Italy. So he was looking to revive a sort of an Italianate style in art. He was quite well known for being influenced by those art of those countries. And Farrow's still not here, so I'll continue to vamp. Yeah. So what happened was he became quite successful with his paintings, and he was given a chance to design his own home. Which he did, and as we'll see, the interior is a lot more spectacular than the exterior. And yes, Leighton. Yeah. Oh, hello.
Hi. Sorry about that. I think I got booted from my internet there. Apologies.
Yes. So there's a lot of curiosity about Leighton's private life, which I'll just mention it here because I've raised it. He was. There was some thought because he never actually married, and there was some talk about him sort of possibly being a repressed homosexual, but that's quite unclear. And he did have very close, affectionate friendships with some women. So it's very much if you've got a picture of his bedroom, you'll see it's actually quite very stripped back and ascetic rather than aesthetic.
Interesting. I don't know how soon I got cut off. Did you hear me talking about the house at all?
You were talking about where it was.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in terms of design, the house is quite unique, I would say. There's kind of elements of the like new Renaissance style that came in the 80s. So again, kind of like the almost kind of classical elements on the doorway. But there's one feature of the externally that kind of points to its interesting interior. Do you want to have a guess what that is, Mr. Hat?
What the interior is, or
that there's one weird feature on the outside that should raise alarm bells to you.
Well, I'm looking at that dome on the left there.
Yes,
that's cone roof.
Exactly,
and
it is just a dome, and as we'll see, this does have kind of Islamic vibes. And so
yes, it does, doesn't it?
Interior. Now, I don't know where this is from, but I found this most wonderful cut-through shot.
Oh, this is a good house.
of the house. So we can see it's done in 3 floors. And I will talk you through as I remember it. So you can go here. It's a museum. It's probably one of the best museums in London. This is the entranceway. If you turn, there's like a little mini lobby here, and then the reception areas at the back here, and it takes you into this main square. And I think this is called the Arab Hall. This entire area across here, and you'll see why in a second. On the left, there is this kind of mini. I would call it like a Moorish folly. It's basically like a mini mosque slash bathing pool. And then on the right hand side is the staircase up to the first floor. Now on the first floor there's like a couple of rooms. I think there's like the main kind of hall slash gallery. There's like this little snug area, and then there's the dining room and bedroom. And then across here on the other side is the artist's studio. Now you can see, like one thing that we'll see time and time again is the importance of light for the artist, and this is where Leighton got all of his work done. You can see it's a heavily gabled roof, so like the pitch is very high, which then allows him to bring in tons of life. So he's kind of like painting in the attic, really, and it's a long corridor. Now, actually, they've actually built a new building to the right here, and they do like galleries and stuff here. So you can basically ignore that. That's not original. I'm not sure whether they had this kind of glass frame to it originally, but I do know that around about the 1880s, there is lots of kind of revolutions in steelwork, meaning that these kind of like large glass structures were being created.
Something to bring up just now, because I noticed this with the Carlisle, when I was doing research for Carlisle Day, he had a room in the attic. And the thing that a lot of people, I think, don't realize now is that European cities in this era, the buildings were all rather sort of like this, the townhouses like this were so crowded, so close to one another, that often on the street between them, the extremely narrow street would basically get no light. So if you wanted any light at all, you had to be as high up as you possibly could be, because the sunlight just wouldn't get down that low.
That's a great shout. I mean, I would say that the area that this is in it would have been suburban at the time. Basically,
yes,
it's now quasi.
It was a greenfield site, I should imagine.
Yeah, but even then, these are individual. There's lots of these kind of individual houses, but I would say that Leighton's house is quite possibly palatial in size. I mean, not in terms of floor space, maybe, but it's a big building, especially for the Victorian period. So very sumptuous. So let's take a look through. And this is the view from the sort of reception area across here into that kind of main square. I'll keep coming back just to kind of... And this is the Arab Hall across here. And you can already start to see one of the kind of themes of the space. A lot of pictures on the walls. Now, I don't know how accurate they've managed to make the space. Often these museums will try and take old photos and try and match it up to what they look like. And they usually do quite a good job. But you've got already this kind of beautiful ebonized skirting, this dramatic double door, and then this interesting piece of sculpture that Leighton created in the center. I think it's a Greek figure. Now, here's a view of that kind of little entranceway. And you can tell already it's a really weird mishmash of styles. So you've got, for example, this very Greek style mosaic, and again, it's like if you see a mosaic today, it's always crap. I haven't seen a good modern mosaic done. I don't know what it is. It's like, I don't know if it's the quality of the tesserae or something. They're not small enough. It's always rubbish.
I mean, you'd think, given the ancient art of the mosaic, that there would be enough material around on how to do a good one. Surely, like people should know, shouldn't they? Or is it the art is just being lost?
Well, yeah, I think it's the will and the skill has gone.
Can't get the staff these days.
Exactly. So you've got the kind of Greek influences. You've also got these Corinthian columns across here with brown marble, and I think these are just painted. So nice Greek influences. You've got kind of like Victorian moldings and skirtings, but then boom, you've got this kind of amazing turquoise blue Turkish style
very aqua, isn't it?
Tiles, and then you've got the kind of Turkish ware presented on these kind of presentation tables as you go through. So it's called the Arab Hall for a reason. There are these strong Oriental influences. I mean, just in terms of the interest in the Orient, I want to point you towards William de Morgan, who is a famous arts and crafts ceramicist. And both him and Morris were very interested in Turkish tiles and glazes. And I'm pretty sure it's De Morgan that does the tiles for these spaces. They're all kind of like English done, but in the style of Turkish. And when I say Turkish, it's like Ottoman Turk. So basically the whole of the Near East, really. Okay, let's have a look at the weird mosque space across here. So again, it's got a mosaic floor. There's kind of like a pool with some water at the center. In terms of the detailing, it's quite interesting. They've got a combination of the De Morgan style Turkish tiles, and this is very much like you'd see in like the Blue Mosque in Constantinople.
Yeah, very much so.
And then, but interestingly, he's gone for a golden mosaic band. Now, if you know anything about Islamic architecture, a lot of mosques actually have these bands from Byzantine artists. So especially, I'm thinking of
the Byzantines.
Yeah, the Damascus Mosque, for example, or the Dome on the Rock, both have these quite dramatic and beautiful Byzantine-created mosaics. So it's someone. So Leighton's obviously been across to the to Syria and check that out. You've got these kind of quite beautiful little columns either side, and then the dramatic. You can't really see the dome, and I mean this for me is like the worst piece in the space. Is this kind of strange arts and crafts electronic light. All I will say to defend it is around about the 1880s, there is this kind of push to electrify the house and to understand how to use like electric fittings. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking Norman Shaw, for example, in Cragside is like, which is contemporary to this roughly, is the first house to have electrics all the way through. And so, but what's interesting is a lot of arts and crafts artists try and incorporate the electric light in their fittings. Mm-hmm. But you can see here, this is the sort of, I guess they're kind of trying to kind of glorify the bulb here a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just looks like weird horns on these flying hearts. So I don't know if that works. You've got these kind of like Ottoman style seats which run across the walls, and I would say it's like a very cool space in terms of the physical meaning and the I know the other meaning as well. Where
I imagine it wouldn't be too pleasant in here during the London winter with this fireplace.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I don't think there's no central heating in this space as well.
Oh, and I should, by the way, for fans of pop culture, I believe there was some part of a recent Doctor Who program that was shot in here. More famously, the video for The Stranglers' Golden Brown was filmed in this very room.
There we go. That's great. Great song. Great music video. They sort of dress up like music band, don't they? And
yes, they do. Yeah, they're all sort of they're in tuxes and bow ties and stuff. I've got it up at the moment.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. So again, a totally wacky space, but again, it's showing the kind of interesting aesthetic influences. I mean, for me, I'm not that interested in kind of Kufic, all these kind of Kufic or Nazareth writings and stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't really like the Turkish style too much personally, but I love the Byzantine band across here. And again,
this is lovely, isn't it?
This is as good as you'd see in the palaces of Sicily, for example, in terms of quality. And there's some just really nice little detailings, like this kind of like, it's like a woman centaur griffin thing. It's great, very cool. I think
it's a very Christian insertion into a very Islamic space, isn't it? That golden band, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because again, you sort of get that in a lot of Islamic art. but it's definitely more pronounced. So it's funny. And again, like I said, I'm pretty sure that these tiles here are all done by Englishmen. I think these ones are imported because I think they did. I think they had a couple of originals still. So again, it's kind of like being anglicized a little bit. But yeah, that's the kind of first space. I mean, who doesn't want an Islamic pool / mosque to show their visitors around? I mean, that's pretty cool. And you could have like a great cocktail party in that.
How do you think he pitched that to the people that were going to build his houses? By the way, I want just a mosque just in my house that I can just hang out in. I don't want it to have any real function. It just needs to be a mosque, just in the house.
But you know what? Again, I think that's part of when we talk about beauty today and what's lacking. Even if we had the idea to do this, I guarantee no contractor would take on this job. They would think you are utterly mad.
Even if you had the money.
Even if you had the money, they wouldn't have the ability to do it 100%. There is just so much skill lost.
To be fair, even then, I imagine that this required so many individual craftsmen to come and do lots of small things. The very, very specialized things you would need for this to get done. Maybe you'd have to actually hire artisans from the Middle East to come and do. There must be some people left that can still do all this traditional stuff.
Yeah, I guess it could have been easier in those days just to kind of bring over your Turk on a steam. Well,
I mean, or something. I think it was on one of these streams that we pointed out that back then England was full of craftsmen. For this, anything you wanted, you could find somewhere a craftsman that would do it. Didn't we look at? In fact, I don't know if I'm thinking of Slingsby's talk at the event where you saw this entire hall full of people just doing swirled fittings and swirled supports and swirled beams and things.
It was at the plaster rooms, Victorian plaster.
Yeah. Just an entire hall of young apprentices just working on that one specialized thing, and there's clearly an enormous amount of a demand for it. So.
That's actually, I think, one of the biggest consequences of the First World War, because again, we think of it in terms of monetary value, the empire severely diminished. There's no money to build anything, but then I think just so many of the skills were destroyed, and it's really interesting. So, by the time of the First World War, stepping back a second, the arts and crafts movement had created loads of guilds and spaces for craftsmen to kind of relearn these skills again, and they were doing pretty well. But after the First World War, Morris and Co had to shut most of their craft spaces, and a lot. Basically, the arts and crafts movement disappeared overnight because all of the craftsmen were either dead or their salaries were. They could make 10 times the cash in a factory somewhere else because there's such demand for male laborers and stuff. So yeah, very, very sad. Okay, let's move on. I don't dwell too much. Okay, so imagine we're moving out now. If I just kind of show you across, we've moved out across through the corridor to the staircase space across here, and again, there is a light from above. Again, it's hard to see. So can you see this dome across here? Basically, the light is being pulled all the way down into the staircase. So again, we talked about the kind of the darkness of the Victorian home. Even without other houses nearby, light's super important. And what's interesting about the late Victorians is that they really knew the importance of these kind of skylights. But that light gives it this kind of beautiful natural glow. The staircase itself is this kind of ebonized. We'll look at it from a different angle. And again, I think this is I'm pretty sure this is from what they're called, Sri Lanka. What's the correct name of it? Sorry,
Ceylon.
Oh yeah, yes, a Ceylon ivory embellished panel across here.
That would be marquetry.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I'm losing all my words tonight. And then the stuffed peacock. I mean, this is what you need to kind of this is the aesthetic movement right here.
I kind of want a stuffed peacock.
If you don't have a stuffed peacock, your aesthetic brethren will decline your invites for all other future galleries.
To be fair, I wouldn't mind keeping a real peacock, because I mean that used to be quite fashionable. You'd have a peacock on the lawn. But according to Mr. D, they're like horrible creatures to try and keep. So
they are extremely loud. I used to live next to a castle which had live peacocks in it, and they were extremely loud. And sometimes they would land in our garden. And the cats would be both tempted and terrified because they were tempted because they recognised it was a bird, and so therefore they were technically able to eat it, but it was actually about 10 times its size, so they were terrified of it. So it's quite amusing.
Just another note here. You obviously got these kind of Chinese vases as well. So again, more Oriental influences. I mean, there is kind of like an Asian invasion of sorts, like culturally in the kind of 1880s period. I love, we often think about the weeaboo today. These Japan-loving, whatever, like manga reading people. But the original weeaboos are from the 1880s, and they're this aesthetic movements that would just love anything Japanese, anything Chinese. They would sort of dress up in kimonos, and
nothing ever changes, does it?
Exactly. You got like Gilbert and Sullivan
doing the Mikado.
Yeah, exactly. But that was inspired. There was a specific Japanese trade venture that came to London. And I think Gilbert went around and then was like, we need to make a show based on this. And again, I think there is this kind of wave of cultural influence from all of these places. So
you had Whistler's Peacock Room, which was the height of the aesthetic movement.
Yes, exactly. Which again is kind of similar colours and vibes. It's about gold and opulence and the Oriental. Okay, here is the view from the other side. Slightly different lighting during a different light, but again, as we're kind of approaching the kind of more lived-in normal space, I mean, just notice the kind of Victorian style of paintings on the wall. Now, I just wanted to chat about that for just 2 seconds because this fashion has sort of gone into decline. All the kind of dado rails have been removed from most period houses now. But like, what's your thoughts about lots of paintings on a wall a la Victorian style? Is it cool or is it too fussy?
I quite like it. I think it's quite suitable for that kind of art. And also that art was painted with that in mind. The artists were expecting to have their art seen in this way. And if you go to sort of some of the grand museums, I think particularly like the Walker in Liverpool, you'll see sort of walls like this, and I think it works very well. And especially when it comes to Moreau, see the previous symbolism stream on that, and that was completely filled floor to ceiling with pictures, and the frames are practically touching as well.
I think to pull it off, you need to have that kind of variance in frame, because again, that adds a bit of kind of contrast and detail, and then you need the pictures as well. And that's possibly what we're missing. But Hat, this is how I imagine your house is filled with your prints, your various prints.
Well, the thing is, again, I'm so tardy with it, but I have so many nice prints, and I haven't got them framed yet. I mean, if I had them framed all like this, I'd be completely bankrupt, so it wouldn't really be practical. But in terms of the sort of cluttered, I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way, but these kind of cluttered pictures. I think that it's one of those things that isn't objectively good or bad, but you have to know what you're doing, because I've seen examples of it done really badly, where like clearly like someone's got this like old mansion house, and they've got like 1 billion pictures, and they've just crowded them all onto a wall, and you can't even see the wall. It's just a sea of pictures, to the point where there's enormous ones next to tiny ones. So I think it's fine as long as you know how to manage the space, as long as you don't overcrowd. Like I'm quite a fan of having like one huge painting or portrait on a wall like that, say, as opposed to there's lots of smaller ones. But yeah, basically, as long as you know what you're doing with the space, then yeah, you should be fine. But yeah, I've seen examples of it done very haphazardly.
Interesting. One other thing I want to bring up is the banister, which is again this beautiful ebonized. So again, just technique-wise, a lot was being taken from Japan. So this is a Japanese lacquered style. You can see, look at that kind of almost plastic gloss on the top here, which again known as Japanning. Now, do you know where this lacquer comes from? I bet Alex will know, because he is He knows everything. all artifacts.
Is it something like from Malaysia or something? Isn't it Malacca, the Malacca Straits?
It's like a specific kind of oak tree that's poisonous, and they bleed it like a maple tree, basically, and the original stuff. But so basically, it's totally poisonous in its liquid form, and then it just hardens with this beautiful black or red gloss, and then you kind of you literally use gold to kind of create the gold elements to it. But I just love the use of the Japanning there. Interestingly, they try to do during like the Georgian period, where they get all of these kind of japanned items, but they want to recreate it. They'll use like a lacquer or like English techniques, but they don't know the secret until Japan opens up, basically. Just look at the banister as well. These kind of hooker-looking spindles there, very unique, very interesting, and lovely little detail. Now you go up the stairs, and this is the landings across here, and then you've got this kind of little snug area with a fireplace, this lovely chaise lounge, and then again this kind of intensity of pictures here. But again, just that kind of the light spacing here, where again it's just such a clever building for pulling in the lights. Here you go. This is another dome here. So we've got one dome, one skylight here, one there as well. So what do we think about this little space here?
Oh, it's grand, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wonderful. I like it very much. I
like the cool blues setting off the green, so it doesn't become too gloomy. Gives it sort of freshness.
Yeah, it's a good shout. One thing I wanted to say as well, if you look at the walls, it's a silk on the wall, and again that's a thing again that kind of dates back to, I would say, the maybe like late 17th century, having textiles on the wall. And I don't know why we don't do it today. I guess it's a real pain in the backside to clean your silk, but
and also very, very costly, I should imagine.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised. I don't know, like one roll of Morris hand printed wallpaper nowadays is like 150 quid. So I can tell you that like actual silk would be cheaper to put on the walls than to put on Morris.
You just know that Pharaoh has like, when he's looked into decorating his house, he's tried all of these different things. He's tried to have a recreation of like this, or like the gold room, like, or
I have things. I have a very modest house and a modest style. Thank you very much, Mr. Hat. So, okay, here it is. I've managed to find the one old picture, as it was at Leighton's death, of the dining room. Now, I apologise for the unbelievably small image, but you can sort of get an idea of the fussiness of it. But I thought it would be interesting to compare it to the modern reproduction, and I think they've done a quite good job. They've actually removed they've removed some of the kind of practicalities out there to showcase some more of the art. So you can see that there's a picture above the doorway here, above the fireplace. And they've removed this kind of like a cabinet. So
often what they do is they remove some of the furniture because they need to allow more space for foot traffic, for people to actually circulate. So they do tend to remove some of the furniture just to allow more visitors, sadly.
What I love about this space is that, again, you've got the kind of dining table with the fireplace. And again, we're just so used to our central heating. But you'd need to have that, like, most Victorians would eat in a fireplace heated room, wouldn't they? Basically.
Well, the issue is in this period. I mean, any period before having central heating, is that if the room doesn't have a fire, it's cold. Like it's just cold. Like unless the weather is unusually warm, it's a cold room, and it's not. No one wants to be sat frigidly eating in the cold. So a fireplace in the dining room is very important. Also, this is an example, I think, of what I like of having like large, like just a few large paintings as opposed to lots of smaller ones. I think this is a slightly better aesthetic in a room like this, personally.
Yeah, it's again, I do wonder how true, because they've turned it basically into a gallery of sorts as well. So like, I don't know, I'm not sure how accurate this would have been personally, but I mean, something like this I quite like because it just shows the lived-in space. There's a little bit more furniture in here.
Yeah, it's a home.
There's some candelabras candelabras on top there for some kind of nice mood lighting, and then again, it's all about kind of showcasing and showing off your plate. I mean, this is something that's very much gone out of vogue, isn't it? The
showing off China.
Yeah, exactly. Is there any thoughts on that at all as a practice, or
those traditional? I don't know. There's probably a technical term for them, but they're like a wooden cabinet that like every working class kitchen had in this era, like
Welsh dresser.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, like a Welsh dresser where it's got like racks. Yeah, where and you don't keep all your plates and china and things and all tucked away in a drawer. You just have them on this dresser. They're open because, of course, these were not cheap things. These were not. It's not like you could just pop and get a set of plates or whatever for nothing. These were expensive, very often handcrafted items that you needed to keep about you. You couldn't afford to break them or to lose them, but you would want to show them off because you that's your best china. You want to show it off.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because again, it's just like that fundamental idea of aesthetics, where again, it's kind of like you're proud of the items that you have, as opposed to kind of like hiding away your cheap £2 IKEA plate that no one's going to see because it's going to have food on it anyway. Exactly. It's kind of like the literal skeleton in the closet. But maybe this is it. We need to bring back the Welsh dresser. That's an advocate for it in the house.
Have a set of best china that you keep pristine on that Welsh dresser, and whenever you have guests, you serve them tea on it. But this is you're right. We need to return to this. I mean, look how much like color and flavor it adds to the room. Look at the way they're all arranged out.
And I guess it's a way of like tying back some of the kind of Oriental themes as well. Look at all my Oriental plates,
like buttons on a waistcoat.
Yeah. Or, any comments, Alex?
Yes, I'm all for reviving that sort of displaying of nice china. You do sometimes get it in later periods. I think when you look at some of the you see them in museums, of course, that's very common. But now I think that they're being phased out in museums because they've got this feeling that cabinets of displaying actual objects is rather problematic. They'd rather have some sort of interactive something.
The interactive display is like
Cursed.
The worst. It's literally the worst thing. It's so crap. They always break.
It's very unhygienic too. Like just everybody like rubbing their hands on a screen.
I have got some good stories about that, but I can't say it without doxing myself. But let me just say that I am very, very, very much friendly with a number of high-ranking curators who have been through that. Where again, it's all forced down from above to try and make it more appealing. Younger people. It's like
relatable.
How can we make the kids like this exhibition? Or let's give it an iPad. Let's put an iPad in there with some kind of app or something. Terrible.
Dear Lord. Yeah, awful stuff.
Okay, and then let's move across finally. So we've been inside some of the kind of dining rooms. I'm going to pop across here to the artist studio. So it's kind of this like long gallery. This is it looking down from one side. But the first thing you'll notice is just this huge kind of window.
Fantastic.
So much light pouring in. I mean, they sort of formalized it now. I think you can literally hire Leighton House and stuff, and they've turned it into like this music court. You can do like this occasional piano music and stuff.
I'd love to go to a harpsichord concert.
They also do life drawing classes apparently.
Oh really? Okay, yeah. That's cool. That's something. Sorry, you go.
Well, I've been watching recently this YouTube channel called Jago Hazard. Who actually coincidentally sounds a bit like Mr. Adams here. Some similar cadence and manner of speaking. And he does videos about he mostly does videos about old facts about the tube and stuff, and he does videos about the architecture of various things. And one of his videos, again, I can't remember which of his videos it was or what building he was talking about, but it was a building which is now a tube station or a railway station, which was originally built in the 30s, I think, or the 20s, as flats for artists. And like this room here, it had these very tall very high windows. And he pointed out that these were not just because they let in lots of light, which an artist obviously needs, but because they allow you to get extremely large canvases in and out of the building.
Yes.
And it's often a feature that's not actually talked about, because you can open them completely, apparently.
And you in some buildings you'll actually find these bizarre doors which are extremely narrow and very tall, and they go up basically the whole wall, and that's basically a way of getting pictures in and out, because otherwise you have to roll them up, which is of course very damaging. And you'll find that most of these studios, purpose-built studios, I think there's a whole bunch of them in not Notting Hill, Holland Park or something, where they had a row of artists' houses, and most of the studios have their windows facing north, because north is the most even light. You don't get any direct sunlight, because although the direct sunlight is very bright, of course it moves a lot. So what you want is a north-facing window.
Interesting. That's a great fact. And also, I would say that a lot of the painters at this time were painting on exceedingly large canvases. I'm thinking Alma Tadema, the Dutch dwarf, would have these kind of very large, classic. Like I know they must be about 3 meters by 2 meters at the very least. So yeah, you're not going to get that through the door.
Did you know who is the biggest collector of Alma Tadema in the world?
Oh no.
Oh, okay. Is it who's the guy that did Phantom of the Opera?
No.
Oh,
no, it's not Lloyd Webber.
He collects a lot of PRB, but
yeah, he did. It was actually Alan Funt, the guy who founded Candid Camera. Presented and founded Candid Camera. He built up the world's largest collection of Alma Tadema paintings in the world. He had a big show of them at I think the Met Museum, and then flogged them all after inflating their prices. So
Incredible.
Oh dear, the materialist.
Candid Camera.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I love that.
Yeah, very sad. Okay.
But apparently, no, I'll add you one last fact, because I've just thought of it. Alan Funt was actually on a plane that was hijacked. And because everyone recognized Alan Funt as the presenter of Candid Camera, no one believed they'd actually been in a hijack situation. And he had to tell them, no, literally, this is not a prank. We are being hijacked. And it was only when they landed and they deboarded did they actually believe they had actually been in a hijack situation. Yeah,
that's terrible.
That's brilliant.
But I believe that the building I was talking about were the studios behind St Paul's on Talgarth Road in London, that have these enormously high, fully openable windows for the artist canvases. I think somebody in the chat pointed it out. I think that's what it is, but I'll have to refer to the original the video. But it was something to do with it being related to the tube in some way. But anyway,
and this basically this is the last part. This is the other side, and you can see they often have exhibitions, and that there's one going on now. There's one of those kind of larger style academic canvases I was going on about. So yes, it's maybe a little bit too big for the doorway.
Looks like maybe is that the death of Michelangelo? I think it's one of Leighton's more famous pictures, or the death of Dante or something. Yeah.
Okay, well that's I don't want to. We've already taken quite a lot of time on Leighton's house. And any kind of passing remarks at this strange aesthetic?
Yes, I would say it's a really fascinating place. I've been there several times, and I can highly recommend it to anyone who has time in London and is interested in this period, or even if you're not just interested in this period, it's worth a look, because it's a fascinating place.
I might see if I can go next week, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you live in it though? Would you live in it though? Hats.
Honestly, as much as I love it, I'd find it difficult to live in, because I see, the thing is, I'm at heart, I'm like a hobbit, basically. Like I need like a small, like cozy, like sort of cottage-esque house with like a nice like hearth, and all this kind of. I don't find this house comforting enough to live in. And I have trepidation about living in these kind of huge halls. I appreciate them, honestly. I think they're a fantastic place. I would love to to stay there for a while, but personally, I think I would be a little bit. I would be happier in a more kind of traditional countryside sort of cottage or sort of squire's house kind of thing. as opposed to something like this. It's a bit too grand and artistic for me. I feel a bit too humble to live somewhere like this.
I think it's your Catholic sensibilities here. Now, if this was turned converted into a side, what do they call it, like a side chapel,
Like an
I'd love
oratory.
it. Yes, yeah.
Perhaps.
Personal prayer chapel.
But again, the thing is, I partially grew up in kind of houses that were obviously nothing as artistic as this, but again, houses with these kind of hallways and pillars and these kind of great sort of stone spaces. The trouble is they're bloody freezing. Like even now, essentially, they are frozen. Yeah. You can't heat those things for love nor money. And I have too many horror stories of as a kid like waking up and just like dying of hypothermia immediately. So it fills me. And anytime I see a house like this, I think it's gorgeous, but God, I wouldn't want to live there in the winter. But I suppose if you can afford this, you can afford to just like hop off to like North Africa or Italy or something.
Yeah, that's true.
Which he did every year, apparently. Yes.
Also, you mentioned his peerage at the start. So he has the record in the whole world, not just in Britain, any peerage ever for the shortest lived peerage. He was he held it for 1 day, and then he died and it became extinct.
That's really sad.
Yeah, well, when I said he got his baronetcy right at the end of his life,
he really did. Shortest peerage ever.
Maybe that's it. That's the last thing he was living for. Okay, Alex, do you want to choose one of your artists, and I'll bring it up. You can choose anything at all.
I think actually maybe we should go for Ensor because he's because we've spent a bit of time, so I think the other ones, So this is our friend James Ensor, who is quite a character. I think he's worth a stream on his own. But he was a Belgian painter. His mother was Belgian. His father was English. He spoke very good English and French, and I should imagine he also spoke Flemish as well. He lived in Ostend, which is, of course, Flemish coast, so his neighbours would have been speaking Flemish. Born in 1860, died in 1949. So talk about outliving your age.
Yeah.
So born into the High Victorian period and died, in the post-Second World War period. Famously, very sort of sour sense of humour. He was very prickly and combative, brilliantly original. He basically founded expressionism and sort of expressive painterly symbolism, and burnt out by the time he was 40 and spent the rest of his life sort of wondering what had happened to himself. But
and I think did we cover some of his works on the Symbolist stream? I think there's quite a famous one of some like skeleton monks tending the garden, I believe. I think that's one of his works. But
I can't think of skeleton monks. There are some paintings of skeletons, and there are some paintings of masks. No, I can't think of monks. No. I don't think. Well, we may have, but it's certainly worth a stream on his own because he did some great stuff. So anyway, this is him sitting at home at his easel. He was born in Ostend. He died in Ostend. He lived his entire life, essentially, apart from a short period when he was studying in Brussels. He spent his entire life in a single house, in his parents' house in Ostend.
the original neat, just never leave the parents' house. Just stay in there.
He was, yes, and rather than living in the basement, he actually lived in the attic. So as all good artists should.
Yeah. The cringe basement fan versus the Chad attic enjoyer.
Attic enjoyer sounds like a euphemism. You should talk to Mr. D about that. So maybe we could go on to the next one. Oh, he's quite dapper, you can see. So this is his house. His house is the tiny one sandwiched between the two giant
Wonderful.
This obviously the one on the right is extremely modern. I think the one on the left has probably been rebuilt. So this is the one in the middle is the Ensor family shop. So they kept the shop on the ground floor and it sold curiosities, masks, seashells, sort of trinkets, souvenirs. Because obviously Ostend is a big beach resort, coastal resort. So you've got lots of people, including English people, going over to Ostend to enjoy the fantastic food and beer. And they would stop off and buy souvenirs at the Ensor shop.
It's interesting. Victorian period is like peak beach, isn't it? Really, this whole idea of
obsession with the beach.
Yeah, it is a real obsession. You're right, because was there any other age that thought that the kind of seaside holiday was like that good for you? Again, like the Georgians, you go to a spa town?
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? Because it's difficult to think of an age in which, especially given that we're all from the UK, where we're all just used to the beach being this like thing that you can do. Before the Victorian, like, it really wasn't considered a leisurely thing to go to the beach. It was just the ocean. It's where the ocean is. Like, it wasn't, the Victorians. I don't know how it came about. This enormous wave of enthusiasm for going to the beach in your three-piece suit and straw hat, and
Well, I think it was a combination of a health fad, because it was seen as particularly healthy, and invalids were encouraged to bathe and so forth. I mean, originally, of course, you would be going down south, or you'd be going up a mountain to get the clean air, especially for tuberculosis patients. But there was this sort of, it became a very health craze, and you had lots of people prescribing, doctors prescribing that invalids should go off, and they would go to these bathing. They had these bathing sort of buggies that would be taken out into the sea, and people could sort of descend with sort of dignity into the water without having to sort of wade through to sort of paddle out. And then also, I think it's also the people living on the coast basically monetizing their position and getting them some income by getting tourists.
The famous cliche in English kind of film and literature of like the old woman who lives in a seaside town, and she calls her house a, quote, boarding house, even though it's literally just her house with a spare room. She calls it a boarding house. People can come and stay for their seaside holidays. And of course, the other thing I think is probably the railways, because now you can be like a sort of upper working class or lower middle class sort of man with a job, and you can sort of save up and then put your family on the train with your sort of Easter week off or whatever, and take them to the seaside. Take them miles and miles away to the seaside for a week or a day or however long, and then just come back. Whereas previously that wouldn't be impossible. You just wouldn't be a practical thing to do.
Yeah.
Before we carry on, I just want to talk about the interactive experience centre. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Do I take it then, Ferro, that when we're finally in power, you're gonna the first people on your list are just gonna be like the directors that forced curators that enforced the interactive screens in all the museums. They've got to be the first to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, well, as you'll see in our images, most of these are basically tourist sites, so tourist websites, which I've got wonderful photographs of these. For some reason, Google Images doesn't just give you an image on its own; it has to take you to the flipping website where it is. So, apologies for that. I don't usually use Google, but so this is the interior. This is the main sitting room. You'll see on the right an organ. Ensor was an organ player. On the walls are reproductions of paintings. I don't know how much original art they've got, but these paintings are extremely valuable and spread all over the place. Well, I say spread all over the place. Most of them are actually in the Museum of Fine Arts in Brussels, but just down the road. So you've got like a classic mask painting on the left. Above that is a painting of a skate. It's a still life of a skate that was painted, and then you've got some other works there. And on the right, you'll see a very large something that looks like a sort of a mural design. It's actually a reproduction of a large painting that filled that wall and was there for many, many years it was a large symbolist painting that I think was sort of refused for exhibition, and it had to stay in his house because it was just too big and too scandalous. It was called The Entry of Christ into Brussels, and it was sort of seen as almost as a parody of a religious picture, even though I think Ensor was actually he did take religion relatively seriously. This painting existed in that position that it is, that reproduction is, for many years. It was eventually sold, and it is now in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, I believe.
It's funny actually, because this sort of reminds me of one of the modern monstrosities, that is the picture wall. I don't know if you've heard of this expression in interior design, but there is this big trend of having like one wall painted with a dramatic color, or that the rise of like murals on the wall, which are these kind of like printed vinyl bits of art. So you'll see like a Dutch flower blown up in size. So this is the original picture wall, but like I think it's legit if it's an actual painting. But if you're doing a print, it should not be allowed.
Yeah, I quite like just huge painting, but as you say, then when you start having, as you say, the picture wall, it gets very tacky, doesn't it?
Yeah. Interestingly, they've hung these paintings incorrectly. Again, most of them would have been attached by a dado rail at the top here, and they've just attached them to the the back of the. You know what? I think part of the reason for that is because of these textile walls. So again, this is like a damask on the wall again, and I'm pretty sure that it's suspended via a frame. So again, you haven't got a hard wall behind it. Like nowadays, I think it would just be plasterboard, and they've stuck the textile down. But you'd have these kind of like battening around the side, so you could easily remove the walls, which means that it's unsupported, so you couldn't hang a picture on the wall itself. So that's why you had to hang it off the rails. But this is quite like a classic design, I would say. This is maybe like obviously like French influence, maybe a kind of a bit empire style-y. It's a bit of a mishmash of different French styles, plus some of his own stuff as well. But shall I scroll down or go across to a different picture?
Do you want is there anything below? I'm not sure if there is anything on. No, it's just on the next page. So that's a close-up. On the right, you've got some of the weird and wonderful style of sort of objet d'art, or sort of grotesqueries that were sold in the shop by his parents, which did turn up in his paintings.
I mean, that's pretty curious, isn't it?
And that's the front of the building.
I have to say, I'm completely enamored of this life of this man who just lives above his parents' like sort of cheap like souvenir shop and just like makes art, up in the attic, and his parents probably don't understand him at all, just sits and paints below.
Should I see the next one?
Yeah, next page, I think. So that's so these are some of the actual masks that were which turned up in his paintings. Curiosity, there's a swordfish bill there.
Yeah. I love this one here. This is great. Some kind of
subversive character.
Yeah, exactly. This is it. If I was ever doing a bank job, this is the mask I would wear.
Well, I'm glad you've got that one sorted.
You'd blend in, yes.
Yeah.
So here is a painting by Ensor of himself at the organ, with that big painting in the background.
That's cool. I really like that. Yeah.
It's a good one.
So this is painted probably in the 20s or 30s or something. Yes. So this is long after he'd lost his sort of his great originality, and he was just sort of going through the motions a little bit. It's a little bit sad, but that's him with his masterpiece, his rejected masterpiece. This is classic. This is classic tourist board stuff.
It's literally the soy jack. It's the soy jack and like the trad girl.
This is why I had to. As soon as I saw this series, like there's a whole sequence of them. I thought this was just like a beautiful way Oh yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
the eternal Tura.
Yeah, so you have
Turas.
this couple, and they're being staged in this.
Visit Flanders.com.
This is
yes.
Do you think this is slightly the vibe that maybe AA and his wife would give off?
No, because AA would not do this face.
AA would not be smiling at all.
Are you sure?
He'd be like scowling.
No, he would like the skulls. He'd like like the skulls.
Yeah.
And Mrs. A would say that the furniture isn't expensive enough, but that's another story.
So this is them looking at the Cabinet of Curiosities. I don't know what that is. That's something else. And then you've got them reading the leaflets inside Ensor's living room.
Do you think this is do you think this is an actual tourist couple that they just asked to do pictures of, or do you think these some actors that they brought in just to pose for the picture?
I think they're probably real ones who were asked to sort of ham it up a bit for a photographer.
Amazing.
I mean, this guy wasn't paid enough because
he's given us minutes of laughter. He should be compensated for that.
There's a classic book which is kind of like how to steal a scene, and it's all about like it being an extra or a small time actor and just being so hammy that you just get all the attention. Basically, that's what this guy's doing. Legendary.
He's the real star of this website.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So final two images. So this is Ensor in his glory days. So this is when his parents were still alive and he was working up in the attic. So this is him in the attic, surrounded by his masterpieces. And
I love this. I love him just secluded away in the attic. It's so good. It's so good. I don't know why. It's just incredible.
What do you think of his clothing? Do you think it's very fitting?
I love just pictures of artists painting just in a suit. It's just incredible. Just like sad. I love this guy getting up, getting fully dressed to just go and sit in the attic and paint all day.
Yeah,
it's something. I really like the skull on the.
I was gonna say he picked up the skull and he's like, you know what I'm doing with this? I'm gonna put that on my easel later. Yeah. That's going right on top. That's great.
It's not a phase, Mum. Like, well,
the original goth.
Yeah, she brings him up like some tea or something. Yeah.
Yes,
it's not a phase.
So this is him when he was at the height of his powers, and I imagine this would be the 1880s or possibly 1890s.
Very cool.
And here is his painting of himself transformed into a skeleton, painting in his attic, surrounded by top hat, a skull, one of the masks on the floor. So yes, this is him sort of parodying himself.
Slightly disturbing picture, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And
it's all about the memento mori, isn't it? You know, the skull looking down. But it's cool that you've seen the picture beforehand because you know that it's actually there, and that's how he's seeing the skull. Do you know what I'm saying? He's that's already in his head or whatever, and he's thinking about death constantly. So like that stuff that was downstairs seemed pretty grotesque, and just imagine kind of seeing that as a as a small child.
Yeah, I was going to say it probably affected him quite a bit, didn't it?
Yeah. By the way, this is Rue de Flandre in Ostend, where he was actually born in this house.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And then died, did he? In it
no, he actually died in a clinic very close to, but he also he died in Ostend as well. So.
Okay, interesting. Okay, Ensor, excellent. Right, I will pop across to our next place, and that is going to be this one here. I'm going to try and kick it up a notch because we've gone through two houses and we're halfway through the stream. Now, an artist that I wanted to talk about on the Symbolist stream, just didn't have time, was, of course, von Stuck, who is a German, again, aesthetic symbolist based in Munich. And he has a most wonderful house that's worth checking out. Again, I've been to this. He's kind of operating in like the 1880s to like 1900 period. He's got a very distinctive style. You would recognize it instantly. It's kind of almost a bit impressionistic, but highly symbolic. It's very bold colours. But it's also interesting stylistically because I think he's pulling in a lot from the kind of Nietzschean neoclassicism. So again, like Nietzsche goes on about the kind of Apollyon spirit and all that kind of stuff. Von Stuck fuels that into his work, and this is a picture of the original building as it was. It's quite strange. It's kind of classical, but not really at the same time. You've got things like the cornices across here, some kind of Doric pillars on the kind of entranceway, and classical figures on the parapet at the top here. So he's trying, and various friezes. But structurally, this is unlike any kind of Greek building. There's no big triangle roof on the top. So it's already kind of interesting. Here's a picture of what it looks like now. They added an extension which they do cringe modern art in. If you go to the Villa von Stuck, do not go to this part of the building. This is like
unless they're holding an exhibition of my work.
Oh, exactly. were you in there?
No.
No. Wow. Yeah.
If only.
You should be in there. But one kind of interesting thing is this is concrete. So again, it's rather than marble. This is the kind of entranceway that you go through, but you can kind of tell the that kind of Nietzschean classical influence, which is weird because his work isn't that classical in any way. It's very aesthetic. I mean, he has these kind of heroic. Again, I keep going on about Nietzsche, but Nietzschean vibes, I would say. But this is quite classical style. You've got this kind of Herculean figure.
What date is this?
I think it's 1890.
Okay, so this is sort of secession period, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, but because he's in Germany, it'll be part of the Jugend movement. Yes, exactly. Which is kind of like a bit secessiony, but with like a bit of a weird Germanic flavors, basically. Okay, let's have a look inside. I don't
want to sidetrack us too much, but so apparently, according to this article I found, Stuck was the favorite painter of a certain young Austrian politician.
No way.
Say. Yeah.
No way. That's cool.
Apparently, he discovered Stuck in his childhood, and for the rest of his life, from what we know, apparently remained that certain man's favorite artist. And can I ask a stupid question?
Yes.
I'm guessing that Stuck has nothing to do with the Stuckists.
No, he doesn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, unconnected.
He was very popular and very rich as well, and sold lots of work. He's quite prolific. Munich is a very rich and expensive place. If you've been it's very grand, a most wonderful Germanic city, and this is a house in a prime location, so you can give us an idea of his wealth. One thing to say is, as you enter, you're flanked either side by two gigantic statues. This is his Amazon, which again is one of Stuck's actually one of his greatest works. I think he has this kind of full-size version, and he also does smaller ones as well. And I think the actual smaller versions are even better. I feel like the woman is less good, like the hands and stuff. There's a few things that aren't to my liking, but this is kind of like the entranceway. The kind of there's an Amazon on one side, and I think there's a centaur on the other, which are again some of the kind of iconography and figures that he brings in. Now, I haven't got a floor plan, unfortunately, so again, this is me just going from memory. But basically, there's a couple of floors, and you can only go into the ground floor and the first floor, and this is the ground floor, and this is an original picture from what the kind of like it's like Deutsche Kunst, which is like a famous art journal of Germanic art. And here is the original, and you can see that I think they've done as with the Teuton spirit, they've done an excellent work of painstakingly recreating the original space exactly as is. Now, the first thing to note is there's a lot of gold in here, so all of this stuff is gold mosaic across here, so little tesserae, gold backed, and it gives off a really beautiful glow. I mean, when I went in there, they had actually closed up the curtains, and then it was like this kind of low electric light. These are like really small, crappy bulbs, so it has this very kind of like Magian cave-like feel to it as you go through, which is very beautiful. You've got these kind of like little niches around the place, and again, it's kind of like a new interpretation of classicism here. So again, like the marble, like cut marble floors, and then the marble around the place. Again, these kind of like vaults. This is almost like the Titus's arch has similar vaulting to it. So it's kind of like a new interpretation of the classical spirit, but like distinctly not neoclassical. This is kind of like anti-Palladian classicism. Palladianism is all about the kind of simplification and like almost modernism, and this is kind of like just richness and just gold.
I'm thinking here of Trump Towers.
Oh!
Have you seen Trump's apartment?
It's a low blow for this place.
I can't believe it. Just absolutely devastated. Literally,
everyone was thinking it. I was the only one who would say it.
No.
How can he recover? How can he recover after that takedown? That was great.
He may have just murdered Stuck.
Now, one interesting thing about his house is that he has this weird, like, let's just say, kind of culty temple space where
this is the room for the human sacrifices, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, this is it. This is where I'm pretty sure. I think he's into the occult / this new Neapolitanism. Again, this isn't based on anything I've read. But a couple of cool things in here. There's a full-sized like Greek statue that I think is an original, but then all of this is like painted work of his own. So again, Stuck he loves bringing his own work into the space. This is a little frieze of Beethoven, which has almost been turned into like a household god, and then the ceiling has got this kind of almost Mithrandian-esque sky. Like zodiac chart thing on the ceiling as well. So I'm pretty sure some occult stuff went down here as part of, because again in that kind of almost turn of the century, there is this huge movement of like occultism and bringing back spirits and all that kind of stuff, and especially tied to this kind of neo-pagan style vibes as well. So this is a very creepy room. Definitely,
this is the Illuminati chamber.
It is a little bit like that. There's definite like weird vibes going in there. You can still feel evil spirits. This needs a priest to exorcise this room, basically. That's all I'm saying. This is another view from that side entranceway. There's lots of kind of glass and mirrors as well, so it kind of creates lots of beautiful space. I'm not sure whether he did the furniture himself, but I think it was another Jungerstill guy. But again, you can see some of that aesthetic vibes coming in, where it's like japanned wood. On the kind of chaise lounge here, and then upstairs he's got some kind of like rather randomly some kind of classic Antwerpian tapestries, but again there's some really nice little details. So can you see the little frieze on the top here that he painted himself? Again, you've got things like the centaur and these kind of classical motifs, quite nicely done. And again, the kind of use of sculpture as well is really interesting.
And the coffered ceiling is very Greek as well.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. And that's the ceilings. We haven't really talked about the ceilings, but again, I think this is something we're really lacking today. It's like maybe at best you'd get a bit of coving on the corner, but this is all to do with how the ceilings are constructed as well, where you'd let some of the kind of bigger beams show through. But because of today, with our kind of focus on insulation and stuff like that, you can't really make ceilings like these and hit regs basically without losing loads of space. It's really complicated, but basically it's all down to how you construct the different floors. And you see these lines here; these would have been originally these were the joists that kind of hold up everything, and but there's no insulation between them. Anyway, here we go. Here's upstairs. You got this kind of beautiful kind of parquet floor, creating these kind of lovely space. The double double doors, and there's a famous picture of, I think he basically just like a self-portrait as the angel who guards the Garden of Eden. Yeah, he loves the self-portrait.
Artists say.
Yeah, I know exactly. And then this is I think this is the kind of staircase room. So again, this is even more kind of classical white. But again, he does all of this kind of like all of these friezes are his own, I think, that or he was kind of copying other originals and sort of inserting them into the wall. So I quite like it's got this kind of 3D quality to a lot of the spaces, which again we don't really have nowadays. But again, I mean, this is a lovely bit of modern mosaic work here, which again all unique. And again, this snake is one of his symbols that you see time and time again come up. Oh yeah, here's the Beethoven frieze, which is like the mask, which has kind of been almost turned into this weird kind of icon that he has in the weird cult room. But
quite frighteningly real. Yeah. It's got an uncanny. Isn't it?
I should mention that Beethoven was revered because he was not only a romantic, but he was taken up by the Jugendstil artists because he was considered to have embody eternal youth. So Jugendstil means youth style, and it didn't actually mean new style or style of the youth. What it meant was style that is youthful, which is basically anything that they decided was good enough. So there wasn't actually a hard and fast rule about what Jugendstil was. It was just simply what they liked.
It's interesting. Again, I think he's trying to almost turn Beethoven into an icon or like a household god in the kind of classical sense. And again, that's where I feel like there's a lot of Nietzsche in his house. And I do wonder, like having heard that fact about the Austrian painter there, that maybe his obsession with Wagner. Maybe there's something there similar there with Beethoven and that movement.
Perhaps.
And then finally, this is the kind of garden space, and again, it's pretty humble, but I quite like these like classical style sculptures that have been kind of placed around at regular places, and again these little kind of friezes that have been slotted into the walls. But there you go. That's the von Stuck villa. It's a weird. It's a wacky place. If you saw the kind of space, and then tried to kind of guess his artwork style, I don't think it would necessarily match up. I felt like it's a lot more classical than his paintings are, but very, very novel and interesting. Any thoughts on the Villa Stuck?
I like it.
I like it very much. It's a kind of glimpse into a very specific time in art, isn't it? I think it's like it's sort of a recurring thing we do on these streams is that there are some paintings, there are some sculptures, there are some people even, and there are some sort of houses and locations that just offer you this very specific slice of time. And I think this is just, that era kind of summed up, really. It's all here in this house.
That's a good point. And again, I think one problem with it is that it's not timeless. And I think what's interesting a lot about some of the French styles, and again, like maybe even some Elizabethan, is that it does have a timelessness to it, that you can keep using it. Or again, like maybe some of the Georgian stylings, you could have a house today which was basically like 90% Georgian with a few mod cons, and it would still look good. But if I styled my house like this, people would think I'm, like you say, making Trump Towers or something, some kind of statement. You've ruined this house for me now. I genuinely.
Oh, slain.
Yeah, one thing I would say is that it's very. If you're familiar with the works of Adolf Loos, one of the famous secessionist.
The house without eyebrows, or what they said?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it is very similar to this in terms of the marbling, but just without any of the extra. If you sort of like removed all of the ornament and then kept the marble, this is a loose house, loose interior. Okay, enough of von Stuck. Who would you like to do next, Alex?
Well, seeing as we're kind of running low on time, let's have a look at Rene Magritte. This one will be relatively short, but Yes. So obviously, well, as not obviously, because if you haven't listened to these streams before, you won't know that I've actually written a book on Rene Magritte, which was published in September of this year. So I did a lot of research on Rene Magritte, and this is his house at. Let me get it up. Yes, 135 Rue Essegem, Jet in Brussels. Rene Magritte, the Belgian surrealist, born in he's born in the French. He was in Wallonia, in the French-speaking part of Belgium, in 1898. Lived until 1967. Famous for his participation in the surrealist movement. He studied in Brussels, and he lived in Paris from 1927 to 1930. Came back essentially because of the Great Depression. And when he moved back to Brussels, where he had lots of friends and contacts and relatives, he moved to this house, which he occupied from 1930 to 1954. Yeah, so this is a sort of typical. So this was sort of pre-built. So he didn't build this. He just sort of bought. I think he bought this house.
Yeah, and if you've been around Brussels, this is a sort of standard house around there. They have lots of these kind of like very tall and thin townhouses, all quite unique, and especially in that kind of like late Victorian period.
I think the Rene Magritte's house was on the right.
Oh,
yes.
This one, okay. Yeah. But I mean, it's similar. There's a lot of variance in the houses. It's not like your Victorian terrace. No. That they've all got their kind of bits of character, and the form factor is like you get like one room, and then it's like staircase basically. So you better you work your legs, but you can see here, he's living in the attic, right? Utilizing the attic space already, which I can see, which is great.
Well, I think there were some changes made to the house at some stage. So I'm not sure that those dormer windows are original. They could be. But I suspect they may not be. I'm not sure. So certainly the double glazing is not original.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this was his house until he became rich enough to. Well, I'll tell you at the end. So this is a painting called Euclide's Walk, or Where Euclide Walked, from 1955, and this is just like a typical view of a sort of Magritte's archetypal Belgian or sort of European city. So you see lots of these sort of typical for the Belgian house is a small floor plan, very narrow lot. So they had to quote this. So you get sort of quite tall rooms with tall, narrow windows, and so this is. And if you see the arc in the window at the top there, that's something that you recognise from the original, from the first one. Yeah, so it's like one of those windows. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yep.
This is quite an interesting painting, and it's like. You can see that the roof is meant to kind of represent the roof, and there's someone walking on there. Well, I'll be kind of walking on the mass of the roof. It's very witty painting.
Yeah, so he's playing with the illusion of a cone acting in the same way as a converging parallel sides of a street going off into the distance.
Yeah. Interesting.
Just somebody in the chat is insisting that this is not Magritte's house.
Well, he had two. Well, there are two houses. There was his later house as well, which is not open to the public. There is the museum, which is in the centre of Brussels, which is just sort of a public building that was made. That is Magritte's house, as far as I know. I haven't visited it myself. So this is the interior. Now, I suspect that this may have been changed from the time between Magritte because when Magritte left his house in 1954, he was by no means a household name. He was not a national treasure. So there was no move to preserve his house as it had been. What happened was he got a load of money because he started selling paintings in America. and he decided to commission his own house. That was in the 1950s, but he made so many changes that his someone in the chat is saying that it was his house. They were just making a joke. This is not, because Magritte is famous for painting the picture of a pipe, and Sissi Nepa Peep.
Right, I see. Means, I should have got that one.
This is not a pipe.
Yeah. The chat is too witty.
Very funny, Right Honourable Fez. Yeah, proud of yourself.
Yes. So yeah, that's me missing the joke, having written a whole book on Magritte. Yes. Yes. No, honestly, it's a really good book. So anyway, so Magritte got loads of money from selling lots of pictures to Americans, and these were largely, I'm afraid, replicas of his early paintings. So he would just do them to mail order, and he made a lot. I'm exaggerating a bit. So he made a lot of money, and he wanted to buy a house for his wife, who was quite sort of upwardly mobile and wanted a. And Magritte was teased because he bought a baby grand piano for his wife, which didn't go very well down with his communist colleagues. Anyway, so he changed his mind so often that the architect gave up, and they ended up buying like an already existing house, which was quite large and gauche and quite ugly. But this is his original. This is his 1930 to 1954 house, and these columns, I suspect, were put in when that wall was knocked through, and I don't believe that this is original.
No, I was going to say, because you've also got two fireplaces, so this probably was two rooms originally, and I would date these radiators like the 1920s or 1910s. These are like Edwardian style. So interesting, because again, you'd have put in these after you messed around with the fireplaces, because again, I think there's that like almost like a stove or something, or even electric. So yeah, the original Magritte is the original open plan, I hear.
Oh, I've got no belief that these columns are original from Magritte's time. I think they were put in after.
Afterwards. Left. Okay, right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So here we have a staircase. Magritte's art was very much based on observed reality, although of course he was playing a lot with things. But this is just the interior of a typical Belgian house.
Again, yeah, that's what I was saying about you. Basically, you've got the staircase, which is steep, going up in like just all along this side, and then you've just got the rooms to the left-hand side. I mean, they do project back quite far, but then you have quite small gardens. So
yes, yeah. So this is the living room. I'm not sure of the furnishing. Obviously, the furnishing's all changed. I do know that the dogs on the sort of thing. He did have those in his second house. So those are the sort of dogs that ornaments that he had.
Yeah, my enemy, the eternal
ceramic dog. Yeah.
Hate them.
Yes. So
everywhere I go, they follow me.
Yeah. And Magritte was famously sort of, he dressed in a very bourgeois way. He wore a suit and he wore a bowler hat.
He dressed in a very way.
The bowler hat is a bit of an exaggeration. He didn't generally wear one, but it became his sort of alter ego in paintings.
Mm-hmm.
But
how communist was he? How communist was he?
He was a little bit communist. He was with the Communist Party for about like 18 months, I think, after the war. But then a lot of people joined after the war just to sort of show support or solidarity, and a lot of people dropped out when they realised it really wasn't for them. So, yeah, Magritte was a sort of fellow traveller for sort of a while, but I think it's not because he had any deep political or ideological commitment. I think he just thought it was just sort of a nice act of solidarity for the working class.
And again, nice flooring, nice wooden flooring.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is a shot of that painting on the right is actually, I think, the only original artwork that was actually by Magritte in the house. It was stolen. I think it was cut out of its frame. The picture was stolen and was missing for about a good few years until it was returned because the thieves couldn't sell the painting. So Sadly, that was the only original art in there. It's not actually a particularly good picture, but it was stolen, and I'm not sure if it's been returned. I'm not sure if it's actually hanging in the house again.
Sad, although fair play to the thieves.
Well, I suppose.
I'm just checking.
So yet Pharaoh sort of advocating criminality on his own stream. Susan, I hope you're watching.
I mean, they're just gentleman art thieves, aren't they? They're just like, well, we couldn't sell it, so.
I was going to say something that could get me into a bit of trouble, so I won't say anything. So this is Magritte painting a picture of him painting a picture. If you see, sort of recursive style.
Yes, yeah.
This is a painting called Clairvoyance, painted in 1936, and this is a painting of him pretending, acting out the act of painting himself. So the painting shows him sitting at that very seat, at an easel, painting a picture of a dove or a pigeon derived from observing an egg. So this is the sort of the transitive factor, as it were.
There's kind of like multiple meta references and cascadences in there. That's very clever.
Yep. And Magritte painted either in the kitchen or sometimes in the living room. He never had a dedicated studio. He did have, I think, a studio called Studio Dongo, which was his design studio because he did design work, painting posters and the covers for books of sheet music. So sheet music was what you got instead of recordings in the time, and they had covers which were pictorial. And Magritte would design these, and he would also do sort of lots of advertising work. And he did that sometimes he did that in his sort of garden shed, as it were. But when he was painting his pictures, his oil painting pictures, he worked inside. He was very neat and tidy, so he didn't leave a mess at all, and he cleared stuff away. So he was quite archly bourgeois in the fact that he never actually had a proper dedicated studio.
Interesting. I love, Alex, that you've managed to find all of the kind of neat style, like stay-at-home artists who just like living in. They've got a cozy blanket, laughing at the wages.
I think it's based
spending their day painting.
If like you know that if you managed to pull this off now, you'd be there with your easel, and next to you would be like your laptop with like Discord open, just like shit posting all day.
Have you been spying on me again, Panama? I will have to block off that camera that I've got in my laptop. And here is the kitchen, showing where he would have worked. I think they've removed some of the furniture, but this is the kitchen in that house. Would set up with an easel. It's not the original easel. Do you know who has the original easel, by the way? Pop quiz.
Go on.
Go on. Yeah.
The original easel from Magritte now belongs to Sir Paul McCartney, bought by his wife Linda.
Okay.
Macca. So random.
So because McCartney, the Beatles were fans of Magritte, so Apple logo came from Magritte.
Okay.
Magritte painted apples, and so after Magritte's death, Linda McCartney thought that her husband, who was a big fan of Magritte and who actually I think owned a couple of paintings by Magritte, would also like his easels. So his easels and I think his eyeglasses, his spectacles, were bought by Linda and given to Sir Paul McCartney.
Great fact.
That is random, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm amazed that he painted in this space, but again, I sort of love this kind of. This is almost like some kind of artistic rebellion for the bourgeois life, just like normal people being living their lives, and he's just trying to create like an aesthetic experience in a tiny kitchen with no light whatsoever. There is hope for any painter out there. This could be you. Why haven't you converted your tiny kitchen into an artistic studio?
Or not even converted it, just painting painting the kitchen.
Exactly.
Yes. That painting on the easel is not an original painting. That's actually, I think that's based on a painting that was lost. The original is lost, and I think that's just sort of a recreation that they've got on an easel.
Okay.
And this is something else. That's something else. Yes.
I think this is the last one. I don't know if there's any other pictures down here now.
So there you are. So yes, so just a shill for my book, that will be Magritte, published by Prestel in September of this year. So there you go.
I may try and quickly fit in one last one, just super quick, because I did promise it on Twitter to a few people. It's a real shorty, and this is the Italia Mestrovic. Now, for those who don't know, there is I'm going to call him a Yugoslav, because the Croatians claim that he's a Croat and the Serbs claim that he's a Serb. But I would call him like a early modernist sculptor. I don't know how familiar you're with some of his work, Alexander.
Not very.
No.
So you will educate me.
Yes, but I sort of bumped into him through my various Balkan travels, and luckily had the chance to visit his house in Zagreb, the capital of Croatia. But he's done tons and tons of works. Nothing really, I wouldn't say not much has penetrated into kind of Western Europe, but he's very popular even in Central. Like I saw an exhibition of him in Krakow in Poland randomly. I think he's quite big in Slavic spheres. But please check him out. But I just wanted to kind of show his house, because it's another kind of quite interesting space. And this is the entranceway. Already the doorway is kind of like this weird, mysterious portal. And again, I think something we're missing today is just like creating these amazing doorways and spaces. It's just so easy just to put like a boring standard wooden door here.
Yeah.
Look at this. There's drama, even though this is quite simple. It almost reminds me of some kind of like Egyptian temple or this prehistoric room. Then you go through, and then you're entered into literally like a Roman atrium style courtyard, where you've got these kind of pseudo Doric columns holding up this kind of tiled roof. And again, if you know anything about Croatia, it's basically like, this is probably offend loads of people. They're like Italian Slavs, basically. They all look Italian in Croatia.
You've just started a race war on Twitter. You've just started another one. It's kicked off.
Exactly. But basically, when I visited there, it was like 90% Italian tourists. I think they all that's the place where Italians go to on holidays, Croatia. So yeah, this is an interesting courtyard space. But what I quite like is some of the interiors as well. So again, Croatia's it's a funny little place. I would say it's kind of like quasi medieval, quasi kind of Renaissance-y / it got hit pretty hard by the communist hammer, and there's a lot of like brutalist architecture. So this is kind of pre the Tito years, let's just say, and this is kind of like the living space, which is like a combination of almost kind of Renaissance-y room, but these kind of like original style. These are based on like original Yugoslav designs for the chairs, but Mestrovic like hand carved every single chair in the space, as well as this gigantic Christ on the cross with this kind of seraph on the back. I thought the kind of the Croatians are very, very Catholic. Panama, so I thought you'd appreciate having just like a gigantic
this is
Christ looking from above.
This is the correct way to have your house. Just like I want all my future furnishings to just be like half decrepit antique wooden chairs, and the occasional cabinet, and just like big crucifixes and paintings of the Virgin Mary. Like that's fine, but that's the Panama hat style guide.
Those chairs look excruciating.
Well, I'm sitting on a wooden chair, very much like that right now, and I can tell you it is excruciating, but it's very aesthetic. So,
it's the pain.
That's
a beautiful look.
That's so Catholic, isn't it?
My back is well, exactly. You don't want to have too much like comfort and luxury around, because then you'll become a cursed modern and you'll forget God. So you have to make sure that you have a sore ass.
It's also got this awesome gallery space at the top. I think it's like a staircase behind here, and you kind of look. You can look down upon.
I love that.
You know, you can make a grand entranceway to.
I
That's
would
where you
love
put the musicians.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's a good point, actually. Yeah,
up there. I would, in fact, in illustrations and paintings from the medieval period, they always have the musicians up on a little gallery like that, don't they?
Yeah,
they're always up there playing. And I would love,
return.
one of my dreams is to have a house with like a walkway like that, just over like a living room or a dining room, for no reason. It's just good. It's just good.
There you go. There's the staircase up.
Look at that. This is of all the things we've seen so far, I would choose to live in this one.
It's interesting. Yeah,
homely.
I mean, he's created loads of kind of little niches and kind of spaces for his own sculptural work, and he lived here. He had his own studio on a different space. I think it's like on one of the islands. And I also visited that space, but the atelier is kind of like where he did a lot of sculpture. A lot of his sculptural work. He's got a huge like time period, basically. I think it's from like 1890 all the way to the 30s. And lots of work. And this is upstairs. And again, it's interesting because it's kind of like almost ethnic, kind of Slavic stylings brought in, but also again very much what we'd recognise as kind of like this kind of Tudor ceiling. And if you know anything about Croatia, you know, Dubrovnik, etc., has a lot of these kind of Tudor, or like there'll be Renaissance style buildings knocking around still. But it's quite interesting that he kind of tried to create like a revival house. But then also created this is like a less nice garden space. I think this is like what that cursed replacement grass or whatever.
Is that AstroTurf?
Yeah, I think it's AstroTurf. Really? Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember. And then that's there's this kind of like mini courtyard area where all of the rooms bring their light in from above, basically, which is quite. This
is my trouble is that I'm fundamentally like a Mediterranean soul, and I just anything like all the things we've seen so far. Yeah, I know, just in Wales, you know, in the 21st century. So I mean, I love these like enclosed courtyards. I love those
Republic of Wales.
Oh yeah, People's Republic of Wales, the alcohol-free Republic of Wales. I love like Spanish, Moorish, even some Afghan houses do it too, where they just have like these quite tall buildings with this enclosed courtyard like hidden inside them. It's fantastic. That's exactly how a house should be, I think. So it's like hacienda-esque courtyards.
And where would we be without the obligatory gigantic artist window?
Yeah. Gotta get your canvases out, you know.
And one thing we forgot to mention is that it's all positioned to get the maximum sunlight. So do you know the direction towards the sun though? I don't know, Alex. I wonder if you'll.
Well, cool. You get the most even light if it's facing north, but you would get the most direct sunlight if it's facing south.
Okay, I guess they probably know the best way to get.
It's less, if you're a sculptor, that's less important. Having consistent light.
Yeah, I mean, he created lots of pretty huge works. Most of them are bronzes. Some of his famous stuff is like the Kosovo cycle. So there's like a large, like weird temple thing in Belgrade, which he did all the sculpture for. But then lots of religious works as well. You can sort of see his style, but anyway, it's a bit of a damp squib at the end of quite an intense series of interesting rooms. But he's well worth checking out, and quite a nice, more homely space compared to some of the rest. But let's finish up there for tonight, and we'll obviously do the obligatory part 2 in the future. I think there's still more to come. But do you gentlemen want to give some additional thoughts at the end?
Yeah, it's just it was great fun, and this is a subject that we will never run out of material for. So. And we can't, of course, be comprehensive. So I think we'll have there will be parts in future whenever they are, and we'll have lots to have a look at.
Wonderful. Had any kind of last thoughts on the artist house?
I think I kind of said everything on the stream. I think that it's difficult because on the one hand I want to say that it's good to have this kind of space around you where you can kind of you can mold to yourself, but at the same time sometimes it just isn't practical. So a lot of artists never had this luxury, and a lot of authors certainly didn't. You're sort of moving from place to place all the time, or having to sort of write or paint on the go. And they did just as well. They kind of so I think that it's important, but it's not the kind of be all and end all of kind of how an artist is to live in his rooms. Because the important thing for any artist, more than anything, is the art. If you're like literally like penniless and living on a street corner, you can't stop painting, you can't stop writing, you have to do it. So I mean, like, for example, look at Magritte there. He didn't even really have a studio, he just had a house where he'd like painted the kitchen. Like I quite admire that, just as much as I admire the kind of vast Leighton-esque rooms that you could fit your enormous canvases in, and kind of like have as your kind of your castle, so to speak. But the whole topic, regardless of whether we could say it is or isn't a vital thing, is fascinating.
Wonderful. I think I want to echo your sentiments around. It's interesting how some great art has been created in the most humble and the most grand space. But one thing I did notice was there's a definite classical theme running across a number of like the people who built their own houses. Although that will change hopefully as we see some of the other works later. So again, I don't know whether the artist's mind is naturally drawn to the classical interior and iconic looks, or whether it's just because those artists were sort of located towards the latter half of the 19th century. But an interesting first session. Hopefully we'll have a lot more. I think we've got Morris's house lined up, Watts's house, loads of interesting people. So tune in next time. In terms of shilling, Alex, you got anything that you're currently selling? I mean, there's a great article recently in Russia Today. So check that out. And any good blog posts recently?
Well, thank you very much. Well, I hope that all my blog posts are good, but there's not been many recently because I have been working on a lot of articles and, of course, the course. So no, first of all, yeah. So thanks for mentioning the article in RT. I write for the RT, Russia Today. So I do opinion pieces and occasional journalism. I also write for Spiked. I write for The Critic, and I write for The Jackdaw. The Jackdaw is a independent fine art newsletter, 6 issues per year. You can go to the website thejackdaw.co.uk, and to get 2 or 3 exclusive articles from me every issue. If you subscribe to the print edition, which has got different content to the online version, if you subscribe to that, you can now do it. They've changed over. It's no longer money orders and checks. You can also pay by electronic means, through your bank account. So he's entered the 21st century.
Welcome, exactly.
Finally.
Welcome.
So, and this is the great thing about that is it means that you can get issues abroad. So they post them out all across the world. So you can live anywhere in the world and get copies of this with exclusive content from me. The next article coming up is the next issue is going to be by me, and it's going to be pretty spicy. It's going to be something that's never been written about the fine arts, but it's going to appear in print for the first time, and I think it's going to break a couple of taboos. So if you want to get that, sign up to the Jackdaw via the website to get exclusive content via print. If you're interested in my articles, you might consider buying copies of my books called Culture War and Iconoclasm, available from all book-selling websites. And also special thanks to the chat. Really lively chat. Good to see lots of familiar faces. So thanks a lot.
Hat.
No, I mean, I can't top that outro. I haven't got anything to show at the moment.
The poetry book is out.
Yes, the poetry book is still out. No, well, the thing is, of course, that was very much me dipping my toes into this sphere to see if they would be receptive to poetry, and it seems that people are. People genuinely seem to be enthusiastic, and a lot of people have begun to write their own poetry now, which is what I like. There's an essay in the back of that book where I sort of part of it. I say, listen, we need to be making art. We need to be practicing art. We need to be raising a generation of young men that can write, that can paint, that can compose verse, that can make music, because that's what's going to outlast us longer than anything else. I think that's going to be this community's lasting contribution if we have one. So I'm very pleased with that. So what I will do is I'm working on a new collection currently. Can't say when it's going to be out. Like with everything that I try and do, it's going to be quite philosophical and that sort of thing. Probably next, I'll say within 3 months, but probably less time than that. And I'm also thinking about putting out more books too. And basically, I'll have to let you know when those come out. There'll be a video.
I was going to say about the video. You just launched a new video last week, which is excellent.
Yeah, there'll be one coming out. I was going to try and do it tonight, but it'll probably be tomorrow now, or just there'll be a video sometime this coming week. I'm just very inundated at the moment, so things are not quite as stable as I'd like, but there will be a video coming on a Greek philosopher, a lesser-known Greek philosopher called Theophrastus, who I'm doing a video on just because his entire philosophy is just he hates women. Like he hates women. He just can't put up with women. So he becomes like a philosopher and just writes about them for his whole life.
I should add that I actually wrote a review of a book of caricatures of Theophrastus's archetypes or stereotypes. So if you go to my blog, you will find a little discussion of Theophrastus there.
Mm-hmm.
Very good, very good.
Yes, indeed.
For everyone else, please subscribe if you're not subscribed. Please share this video with other people.
Smash that like button for Pharaoh.
Yeah, please do. And I'd love. I really enjoyed some of the comments on the fashion stream last time. If there is an artist house that you think we're missing, please do tell us, and we'll take a look. And if it is worthy, it shall make the list next time. But apart from that, I think we shall say good night, and thank you very much for listening.